Aiden Michael Brooks, you are hereby sentenced to 15 years to life in state prison. You will be eligible for parole after 15 years. This sentence is imposed according to the law.
I don't understand. I didn't mean to.
The Sleepover. September 23, 2017, was supposed to be a normal Saturday for the Brooks family of Riverside, California. The weather was warm, typical for late September in Southern California, and the neighborhood of Oak Ridge Hills was quiet, peaceful, the kind of place where people move to raise families in safety. Jason Brooks, a high school math teacher, and his wife, Linda Brooks, a dental hygienist, had gone to bed at 9:30 p.m. that night, as they did most Saturdays. Their son, Aiden, was having his best friend, Ethan Martinez, over for a sleepover. The boys were in 7th grade together at Riverside Middle School. They'd been friends since 4th grade, or so everyone believed. Jason and Linda had no reason to worry. Sleepovers were routine. The boys would stay up late playing video games, eating junk food, probably watching movies they were a little too young for. In the morning, Linda would make pancakes, and Ethan's parents would pick him up around noon. That was the plan. But at 3:15 a.m., Jason Brooks was awakened by a sound he would never forget. His son, standing in the doorway of the master bedroom, his hands and clothes covered in blood. "Dad," Aiden said, his voice eerily calm. Something happened to Ethan. Aiden Michael Brooks was born on July 8, 2005, in Riverside, California. He was a quiet child, introspective, bookish. He loved science fiction novels, video games, and drawing elaborate maps of imaginary worlds. He was not athletic. He was not popular. But he was kind, gentle, and well-liked by his teachers. Ethan James Martinez was born on April 14, 25, also in Riverside. He was the opposite of Aiden in almost every way. Outgoing, athletic, confident. He played soccer, baseball, and basketball. He was popular at school, the kind of kid who always had friends around him, who always had something funny to say. The boys met in 4th grade when they were assigned to the same class. Ethan was drawn to Aiden's intelligence and creativity. Aiden was drawn to Ethan's confidence and social ease. They became friends quickly. Inseparable friends, according to their parents. But what the adults didn't see, what they couldn't see, was that the friendship was not equal. Ethan was the leader. Aiden was the follower. Ethan made the decisions. Aiden went along. And slowly, over 3 years, the dynamic shifted from friendship to something darker. By 7th grade, Ethan had begun using Aiden as the target of jokes. One, he would mock Aiden's weight in front of other kids. He would accidentally trip Aiden in the hallway. He would tell other students that Aiden had a crush on someone, then laugh when Aiden was embarrassed, but he always framed it as joking. As friendship. "I'm just messing with you, dude. You know I'm kidding. Come on. Don't be so sensitive." And Aiden, desperate to maintain the only friendship he had, laughed along. His parents didn't know. His teachers didn't know. Even Aiden himself might not have fully understood that what was happening to him was bullying, because Ethan was his best friend, and best friends don't bully each other, except when they do. The sleepover on September 23, 2017, was Ethan's idea. He had texted Aiden on Thursday. "Ethan, yo dude sleep over this weekend?" Aiden, "Yeah, sure. My house." Ethan, "Cool. Saturday night." Aiden, "Okay." It seemed normal. Routine. The boys had sleepovers every few months. But something was different this time. 3 days before the sleepover, Aiden had sent a text message to another classmate, a boy named Derek Chen. "Aiden, I wish Ethan would just disappear." Derek, "Ha ha, why?" Aiden, "He's not really my friend." Derek, "What do you mean?" Aiden, "Never mind." Derek didn't think much of it. Middle school friendships were dramatic. Kids said things they didn't mean, but Aiden did mean it. On September 20th, 3 days before the sleepover, Aiden used his tablet to search Google. How to kill someone quietly. On September 21st, he searched, "Do 12-year-olds go to jail for murder?" On September 22nd, the day before the sleepover, he searched, "Where to stab someone to kill them fast?" And on the morning of September 23rd, while his parents were at work and he was home alone, Aiden wrote in his journal, a black composition notebook he kept hidden under his mattress. "Tonight is the night. No more Ethan. No more pain. I know what I have to do. I'm not scared. I'm ready." Then he went to the kitchen and selected a knife from the knife block, an 8-inch Wusthof chef's knife, sharp and heavy. He took it to his bedroom and hid it under his bed. He was ready. Ethan arrived at 6:30 p.m., carrying a backpack with clothes, a toothbrush, and his Nintendo Switch. Ethan's mother, Rosa Martinez, walked him to the door. "Thanks for having him," Rosa said to Linda Brooks. "Of course," Linda replied. "The boys always have fun together. What time should I pick him up tomorrow?" "How about noon? I'll make pancakes for breakfast." "Perfect." "Have fun, mijo," Rosa said, kissing Ethan on the forehead. "Mom, stop," Ethan said, embarrassed. "I'm not a kid." Rosa laughed and left. It was the last time she would see her son alive. The evening proceeded normally. The boys ate pizza pepperoni, Aiden's favorite, though Ethan complained that he wanted sausage. They played Fortnite on the Xbox in the basement, trash-talking each other the way 12-year-old boys do. At one point, Ethan said, "Dude, you suck at this game. How are you so bad?" Aiden laughed. "I'm not that bad." "Yes, you are. You're terrible. You're like the worst player I've ever seen." Aiden stopped laughing. At 9:30 p.m., Jason and Linda came downstairs to say goodnight. "Don't stay up too late," Jason said, "and keep the volume down." "We will, Dad," Aiden said. Linda kissed Aiden on the head. "Good night, sweetheart." "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Mrs. Brooks." The parents went upstairs to bed. At 10:15 p.m., the boys started watching a movie. It, the 2017 horror film based on Stephen King's novel. It was rated R, and the boys weren't supposed to watch it, but Jason and Linda were asleep. They wouldn't know. During the movie, Ethan kept making comments. "This is so dumb." "You're probably scared, aren't you, Aiden?" "Don't be such a baby." Aiden said nothing. By midnight, Ethan was getting tired. He yawned and stretched out on the couch. "I'm going to sleep," Ethan said. "You can keep watching if you want." "Okay," Aiden said. Ethan pulled a blanket over himself and closed his eyes. Within 10 minutes, he was asleep. Aiden sat on the other end of the couch, watching the movie. But he wasn't paying attention to the screen. He was thinking. He was thinking about the knife under his bed upstairs. He was thinking about the Google searches. He was thinking about the journal entry. "Tonight is the night." At 12:30 a.m., Jason Brooks briefly woke up. He thought he heard laughing from the basement. He smiled, rolled over, and went back to sleep. The boys were still awake, having fun. Everything was fine. Everything was not fine. The murder. At approximately 2:30 a.m., Aiden stood up from the couch. The movie had ended. The basement was dark, except for the glow of the TV's screensaver. Ethan was asleep on the couch, his breathing deep and even. Aiden stood there for a moment, watching his friend sleep. Then he walked upstairs. He went to his bedroom. He reached under his bed and pulled out the knife. It was heavy in his hand. The blade caught the light from the hallway. He walked back downstairs to the basement. Ethan was still asleep. Aiden stood over him. Later, during his interrogation, Aiden would tell Detective Maria Santos, "I stood there for a long time. Maybe 5 minutes. I kept thinking, just do it. Just do it. And then I did." The medical examiner, Dr. Raymond Chen, would later testify that Ethan Martinez died from multiple sharp force injuries, 37 stab wounds in total. 19 wounds were to the torso, chest, abdomen, and back. 7 wounds were to the neck and throat. 5 wounds were to the arms. Consistent with defensive injuries, Ethan had woken up during the attack and tried to fight back. 4 wounds were to the legs. 2 wounds were to the face. Dr. Chen would testify that the attack would have taken at least 2 to 3 minutes, that Ethan would have been conscious for some of it, that he would have suffered. The first wound, Dr. Chen explained, was to the chest likely while Ethan was still asleep. But the wound was not immediately fatal. Ethan woke up. He struggled. He tried to push Aiden away. There were defensive wounds on Ethan's hands cuts, where he grabbed the blade trying to stop it. But Aiden was taller than Ethan, and he had the advantage of surprise. He kept stabbing. Again and again and again. By the time it was over, Ethan Martinez was lying on the floor of Aiden Brooks's basement, surrounded by blood, no longer breathing. Aiden stood over him, the knife still in his hand. He dropped the knife. He looked down at himself. His hands were covered in blood. His clothes were soaked. There was blood on his face where he'd wiped his forehead. He stood there for several minutes, staring at Ethan's body. Then he walked upstairs. The 911 call. At 3:15 a.m., Jason Brooks was awakened by someone touching his shoulder. He opened his eyes and saw his son standing beside the bed. Aiden. What? Then he saw the blood. Oh my God. Aiden, what happened? Are you hurt? Dad, Aiden said, his voice calm and flat. Something happened to Ethan. Jason threw off the covers and jumped out of bed. Linda woke up, saw the blood, and screamed. What happened? Jason grabbed Aiden's shoulders. Are you hurt? Where's Ethan? He's in the basement. Jason ran. Go. He ran down the stairs, down to the basement, and when he reached the bottom, he saw it. He saw Ethan's body on the floor. He saw the blood. He saw the knife. He turned and ran back upstairs, grabbing his phone. 911 call transcript. Date: September 24, 2017. Time: 3:18 a.m. Caller: Jason Brooks. Location: 4521 Oak Ridge Lane, Riverside, California. Dispatcher: 911. What's your emergency? Jason: breathing heavily, my son. There's a boy, he's dead. Oh my God, he's dead. Dispatcher: sir, slow down. What's your address? Jason: 4521 Oak Ridge Lane. Oak Riverside. Please send someone. Please. Dispatcher: what happened? Who's dead? Jason: my son's friend. He's 12. There's blood everywhere. He's not breathing. Dispatcher: is the boy injured? Can you check if he's breathing? Jason: yes, I checked. He's not breathing. He's been stabbed. Multiple times. Dispatcher: stabbed? Sir, who stabbed him? Jason: I think my son did. Dispatcher: your son? Jason: he came upstairs covered in blood. He said something happened to Ethan. I went down to the basement and a voice breaks. Oh my God. Dispatcher: sir, where's your son now? Jason: he's here. He's with my wife. Dispatcher: is he armed? Does he have the weapon? Jason: no way. The knife is downstairs. With the body. Dispatcher: okay. I have police and paramedics on the way. They'll be there in less than 5 minutes. I need you to stay on the line with me. Do not touch anything in the basement. Do not touch the weapon. Can you do that? Jason: yes. Yes, okay. Dispatcher: is your son injured? Jason: I don't think so. The blood I think it's all Ethan's. Dispatcher: okay. I need you to stay calm. Keep your son with you. The police will want to talk to him. Do you understand? Jason: crying? How did this happen? How did this happen? Dispatcher: sir, help is almost there. Stay on the line. Riverside police arrived at 3:26 a.m. 3 patrol cars, lights flashing, sirens wailing in the quiet suburban night. Neighbors' lights started turning on. People came to their windows, looking out to see what was happening. Officer Daniel Reyes was the first through the door. Jason Brooks met him in the entryway, his face pale, his hands shaking. "Downstairs," Jason said. "The basement." Officer Reyes descended the stairs with his partner, Officer Jennifer Walsh. When they reached the bottom, they found the scene exactly as Jason had described. A 12-year-old boy, lying on the floor, surrounded by blood, clearly deceased. A kitchen knife, lying nearby. Officer Walsh immediately secured the scene. Officer Reyes returned upstairs. "Where's your son?" he asked Jason. "In the kitchen, with my wife." Aiden Brooks sat at the kitchen table, still wearing his blood-soaked clothes. His mother, Linda, sat beside him, crying. Aiden stared straight ahead, his expression blank. Officer Reyes approached carefully. "Aiden?" "Nee." Aiden looked up. "I need you to come with me, okay? We're going to go outside and talk." "Am I in trouble?" Aiden asked. "We just need to talk. Can you stand up?" Aiden stood. Officer Reyes guided him outside to a patrol car. By this time, more officers had arrived, along with paramedics and a crime scene investigation unit. The paramedics went downstairs, but there was nothing they could do. Ethan Martinez was pronounced dead at the scene at 3:34 a.m. The investigation. Detective Maria Santos of the Riverside Police Department arrived at 4:15 a.m. She was a veteran investigator with 15 years of experience, specializing in homicides. But she had never worked a case quite like this. A 12-year-old suspect and a 12-year-old victim. She was briefed by the first responding officers, then went downstairs to examine the scene. The basement was a typical suburban rec room. A large couch, a TV, video game consoles, beanbag chairs, posters on the walls. And in the center of the room, surrounded by evidence markers, was Ethan Martinez's body. Detective Santos had seen hundreds of crime scenes, but this one affected her differently. The victim was a child, and the suspect was a child. She spent an hour examining the scene, taking notes, photographing evidence. Then she went upstairs to speak with Aiden. Aiden had been separated from his parents and was sitting in the back of a patrol car with Officer Reyes. He had been given a blanket to cover his blood-soaked clothes. He sat quietly, not crying, not speaking. Detective Santos opened the car door and crouched down to Aiden's eye level. "Aiden, my name is Detective Santos. I need to talk to you about what happened tonight. Is that okay?" Aiden nodded. "First, I need to read you your rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. Do you understand these rights?" "Yes." "Okay. I also need to let you know that because you're a juvenile, we're going to have your parents present for this conversation. Is that okay?" "Okay." Jason and Linda Brooks were brought to the patrol car. They looked devastated, confused, terrified. "Aiden," Detective Santos said gently, "can you tell me what happened tonight?" Aiden looked down at his hands. "I killed Ethan." Linda gasped. Jason put his head in his hands. "Can you tell me how?" Detective Santos asked. "I stabbed him." "Why?" Aiden was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Because he deserved it." "What do you mean, he deserved it?" "He made my life hell." "Ethan was your best friend, wasn't he?" "No, he wasn't my friend. He was never my friend. He just pretended to be." Detective Santos took notes. "Aiden, did you plan this? Did you think about doing this before tonight?" Aiden hesitated. Then he nodded. "Yes. Yes." "For how long?" "A few days." "Did you prepare anything? Did you get the knife before tonight?" "Yes. I got it this morning. I hid it under my bed." "So you knew when Ethan came over tonight that you were going to hurt him?" "Yes." Linda Brooks was sobbing. Aiden, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you tell us you were being bullied? You wouldn't have believed me, Aiden said. Nobody would have believed me. Ethan was popular. I'm nobody. Detective Santos asked a few more questions, then decided to stop. Aiden had confessed. The case was clear, but there were still procedures to follow, evidence to collect, reports to file. At 5:47 a.m., Aiden Brooks was formally placed under arrest. Because of his age, he was not handcuffed. He was transported to Riverside County Juvenile Hall, where he would be held pending charges. At 6:15 a.m., Detective Santos made the phone call she had been dreading. She called Rosa and Miguel Martinez to inform them that their son was dead. The sound of Rosa Martinez screaming would stay with Detective Santos for the rest of her career. The charges and the decision to try as adult. Aiden Michael Brooks was initially charged as a juvenile with 1 count of murder. Under California law, juveniles charged with murder can be held until age 25 in the juvenile system, at which point they must be released. But Deputy District Attorney Rachel Brennan believed that was not sufficient. She filed a motion to transfer Aiden's case to adult court, a process known as direct filing or prosecutorial discretion transfer. Her argument was straightforward. The murder was premeditated, planned, and executed with extreme violence. The victim suffered 37 stab wounds. The defendant researched methods online. He obtained a weapon in advance. He waited until the victim was asleep and vulnerable. This was not a child's impulsive act, Brennan wrote in her motion. This was calculated, cold-blooded murder. The defense, led by public defender Michael Torres, opposed the motion vigorously. Aiden Brooks is 12 years old, Torres argued. He is a child. Trying him as an adult is cruel, unconstitutional, and ignores everything we know about adolescent brain development. This was a bullied child who snapped under years of psychological torture. He deserves treatment, not life in prison. The hearing to determine whether Aiden would be tried as an adult took place on December 8, 2017, before Judge Thomas Hollingsworth. Both sides presented evidence. The prosecution presented Aiden's Google searches, his journal entry, his confession. They argued that the planning demonstrated adult-level reasoning. The defense presented evidence of Ethan's bullying. Testimony from classmates, text messages, school records showing multiple complaints filed by Aiden's parents that were never properly addressed. They also presented psychological evaluations from Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who had evaluated Aiden extensively. Dr. Mitchell testified that Aiden suffered from major depressive disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of chronic bullying. She testified that he had reached a breaking point, that his actions were the result of psychological trauma, not inherent evil. But Judge Hollingsworth was not swayed. On December 8, 2017, he ruled that Aiden Brooks would be tried as an adult. While the court acknowledges the defendant's age and the evidence of bullying, Judge Hollingsworth said, "The court finds that the nature of the offense, the degree of planning, the brutality of the attack, and the lack of remorse demonstrated warrants prosecution as an adult. This was not an impulsive act. This was not an impulsive act. This was murder, planned and executed." Aiden's trial date was set for March 12, 2018. He would face the rest of his life in prison if convicted. The trial begins March 12, 2018. The Riverside County Superior Court building stands as a modern structure of glass and concrete in downtown Riverside, a stark contrast to the historic Mission Inn just blocks away. On the morning of March 12, 2018, the courthouse was surrounded by news vans, protesters, and curious onlookers, all drawn by the extraordinary nature of the case about to begin. People v. Aiden Michael Brooks had captured national attention. A 12-year-old boy on trial for murder, tried as an adult, was rare enough. But the circumstances made it even more compelling. Best friends, a sleepover, bullying, 37 stab wound. The case had every element that fascinates and horrifies the American public. Outside the courthouse, two groups of protesters faced each other across a police barricade. On one side, members of anti-bullying organizations held signs reading "Bullying kills," and Aiden is a victim too. On the other side, members of victims' rights groups held photos of Ethan Martinez and signs reading "Justice for Ethan and 12 is old enough to know murder is wrong." Inside courtroom 14, Judge Thomas Hollingsworth prepared to begin what would be one of the most difficult trials of his 23-year career. At 61 years old, with silver hair and a weathered face that reflected decades of difficult decisions, Judge Hollingsworth had a reputation for being fair but firm. He did not tolerate nonsense in his courtroom, and he did not show favoritism. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, the bailiff called the court to order. All rise. The Superior Court of California, County of Riverside, is now in session. The Honorable Thomas Hollingsworth presiding. Judge Hollingsworth entered and took his seat at the bench. He surveyed the packed courtroom, every seat filled, sketch artists positioned in the front row, the tension palpable. "Please be seated," he said. "We are here for the matter of the people of the state of California versus Aiden Michael Brooks, case number RCR 2017 8472. This is a first-degree murder trial, and I want to make something very clear to everyone in this courtroom. This is a court of law, not a theater. I will not tolerate outbursts. I will not tolerate inappropriate displays of emotion. And he will." Murmurs of assent rippled through the gallery. "Good. Will counsel please state their appearances for the record?" From the prosecution table, a woman in a charcoal gray suit stood. Rachel Brennan was 42 years old, a career prosecutor who had spent 15 years with the Riverside County District Attorney's Office. She had prosecuted gang murders, domestic violence homicides, and child abuse cases. But this was different. This was a child defendant. And despite her professional exterior, she felt the weight of it. "Rachel Brennan, for the people, Your Honor." From the defense table, a man in a navy blue suit stood. Michael Torres was 38, a public defender who had dedicated his career to representing those who couldn't afford private counsel. He believed deeply in juvenile justice reform, in rehabilitation over punishment. This case was personal to him. "Michael Torres for the defendant, Your Honor." Aiden Brooks sat beside his attorney, looking impossibly small at the defense table. He had grown slightly in the 6 months since his arrest. He was now taller, thinner, his face showing the strain of incarceration. He wore a white button-down shirt and khaki pants, clothing his parents had brought for the trial. His hands were folded on the table in front of him, and he stared straight ahead, his expression unreadable. Behind him in the gallery sat his parents, Jason and Linda Brooks. They looked like they had aged a decade in 6 months. Jason's hair had gone gray. Linda's face was gaunt. They held hands, their knuckles white. On the opposite side of the gallery sat the Martinez family. Rosa Martinez wore all black, her eyes red and swollen from months of crying. Miguel Martinez sat beside her, his jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on the back of Aiden's head with an intensity that bordered on hatred. Ethan's older sister, Isabella, sat between them, her arm around her mother. The two families did not look at each other. "Before we begin jury selection," Judge Hollingsworth said, "I want to address the issue of media coverage. I have decided to allow one pool camera in the courtroom for opening statements and the verdict only. No cameras will be permitted during witness testimony. I believe the public has a right to see justice being administered, but I also believe we must protect the privacy and dignity of the witnesses, particularly the child witnesses." "No objection, Your Honor," both attorneys said. "Very well. Let's bring in the jury pool." Jury selection, choosing 12 to decide a child's fate. Jury selection in a case involving a child defendant is extraordinarily complex. The attorneys must find 12 people who can set aside their natural sympathy for a child, while also being open to evidence of mitigating circumstances like bullying and mental illness. 120 potential jurors had been summoned. They filled the courtroom in groups of 30, and each group underwent preliminary questioning by Judge Hollingsworth before the attorneys began their voir dire. "Ladies and gentlemen," Judge Hollingsworth addressed the first group, You have been summoned for jury duty in a murder trial. The defendant is a juvenile who was 12 years old at the time of the alleged offense. He is being tried as an adult. Before we go any further, I need to know, is there anyone here who believes, as a matter of principle, that a 12-year-old should never be tried as an adult under any 43 hands went up. I appreciate your honesty, the judge said. Those of you who raised your hands will be excused. The law allows for juvenile defendants to be tried as adults under certain circumstances. And if you cannot follow the law as it exists, you cannot serve on this jury. Those 43 people were excused, and 43 more were called in to replace them. The process continued. Judge Hollingsworth asked about biases, about pretrial media exposure, about personal experiences with violence or bullying. Then, the attorneys began their questioning. Rachel Brennan approached the jury box. She was strategic, methodical, looking for jurors who could focus on the evidence rather than the defendant's age. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to ask you some difficult questions, and I need complete honesty. Let me start with this. How many of you have children? 62 hands went up. Thank you. Now, for those of you with children, I need to know. Can you look at this defendant who is 12 years old and evaluate the evidence against him objectively? Can you set aside the fact that he's a child and focus on what he did? Several jurors nodded. A few looked uncertain. Brennan zeroed in on a woman in her 50s who was shaking her head slightly. Ma'am, you look hesitant. Can you tell me what you're thinking? The woman shifted uncomfortably. I have a 12-year-old grandson. And I can't imagine sitting in judgment of a child that age. I don't think I could be fair. Aiden Brooks. I appreciate your honesty, Brennan said, making a note. She would challenge this juror for cause. She continued, Let me ask you this. If the evidence shows that the defendant planned this crime in advance, researched it online, obtained a weapon, waited for the victim to be vulnerable, does that change how you view his ability to understand what he was doing? Several hands went up. Yes, sir. Brennan pointed to a man in his 40s. If he planned it, then he knew what he was doing, the man said. Planning shows intent. Age doesn't excuse that. Thank you. Brennan made a note. This juror was a keeper. After 3 hours, Brennan had identified her ideal jurors. People who believed in personal responsibility, who were not swayed by age alone, who could compartmentalize sympathy and focus on facts. Then it was Michael Torres's turn. He approached the jury box with a gentler demeanor, more empathetic. Good morning, everyone. I know you've been sitting here for a while, so I'll try to be brief. I need to ask you about bullying. How many of you were bullied as children? Or have children who were bullied? Almost every hand went up. Thank you. Now, how many of you believe that bullying can have serious psychological effects, that it can damage a child's mental health? Most hands stayed up. Good, because that's going to be a key part of this case. The defense will present evidence that Aiden Brooks was subjected to years of bullying by the victim, bullying that was disguised as friendship, which made it even more insidious and damaging. Brennan stood. Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is making arguments, not asking questions. Sustained. Mr. Torres, please limit yourself to questions. Yes, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen, my question is this. If the evidence shows that Aiden was bullied for years, that he suffered from depression and PTSD as a result, and that he reached a breaking point, can you consider that as context when evaluating his actions? Many hands went up. Brennan made notes. She would challenge these jurors. Torres continued. How many of you believe that children's brains are fundamentally different from adult brains? That children don't think through consequences the way adults do? Half the hands went up. Thank you. That's going to be important, because we're going to present expert testimony about adolescent brain development and how it affects decision-making. The process continued for 4 full days. Each side used their peremptory challenges strategically. removing jurors they believed would be hostile to their case. Each side challenged dozens of jurors for cause, arguing that bias prevented them from being fair. By March 16, 2018, they had their jury. The jury: Juror #1, Patricia Delgado, 58, retired nurse, married, 3 adult children. Selected as foreperson. Empathetic, but believes in accountability. Juror #2, Marcus Webb, 44, construction foreman, divorced, 2 teenage sons. Skeptical of excuses, but open-minded. Juror #3, Jennifer Huang, 34 stars, software engineer, single, analytical, evidence-focused. Juror #4, Robert Santos, 67, retired teacher, widower, torsion, has experience with troubled youth. Juror #5, Christina Valdez, 39, paralegal, married, 1 daughter. Sensitive to bullying issues. Juror #6, David Kim, 52, accountant, married, methodical thinker. Juror #7, Angela Morrison, 41, stay-at-home parent, married, 3 children. The most sympathetic to the defense. Juror #8, James Preston, 35, IT consultant. Logical, no nonsense. Juror #9, Maria Gutierrez, 29, elementary school teacher. Understands child psychology. Juror #10, Thomas Reed, 56, postal worker, tar. Quiet, observant. Juror #11, Sarah Connolly, 48, real estate agent, divorced, has a 12-year-old son. Juror #12, Kenneth Lawson, 60, retired police officer. Values law and order. 2 alternates were also selected. Judge Hollingsworth swore them in. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have been selected to serve in a murder trial. You will be the judges of the facts. You will listen to the evidence, evaluate witness credibility, and ultimately decide whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty of the charges against him. You must set aside any sympathy, any bias, any preconceptions, and decide this case based solely. We do, they answered in unison. Very well. We will begin opening statements tomorrow morning at 9:00 a.m. Jurors, you are instructed not to discuss this case with anyone, not to read news coverage, not to conduct your own research. Is that understood? The jurors nodded. Court is adjourned until tomorrow. The gavel fell. Aiden Brooks was led back to Juvenile Hall, where he would spend another night before his fate would begin to unfold in earnest. Opening statements, March 17, 2018. The courtroom was even more packed on the second day. The pool camera had been set up in the corner, and journalists filled the front rows with notebooks and recording devices. At 9:15 a.m., Judge Hollingsworth called the court to order and addressed the jury. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you are about to hear opening statements from both the prosecution and the defense. I want to remind you that opening statements are not evidence. They are simply each attorney's preview of what they believe the evidence will show. You must base your verdict only on the evidence presented during the trial, not on what the attorneys say now. The jurors nodded. Very well. Ms. Brennan, you may proceed with your opening statement. Rachel Brennan stood and walked slowly to the lectern position between the jury box and the defense table. She carried no notes. She had memorized every word she was about to say. She looked at each juror, making eye contact, establishing connection. Then she began. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, on the night of September 23, 2017, 2 12-year-old boys had a sleepover. They played video games. They ate pizza. They watched a movie. And then, while one of those boys slept peacefully on the couch, the other boy went upstairs, got a knife from the kitchen, came back downstairs, and stabbed his friend 37 times. 37 times. Let me say that again, because I want you to understand the magnitude of what happened. 37 stab wounds start. That's not a single impulsive blow. That's not even a brief moment of rage. That's a sustained, deliberate attack that lasted several minutes. The victim, Ethan Martinez, woke up during the attack. He tried to fight back. He had defensive wounds on his hands where he grabbed the blade, trying to stop it. But he couldn't stop it. And he died on the floor of that basement, surrounded by his own blood, while his best friend stood over him with a knife. That best friend was Aiden Brooks, the defendant sitting right there. Now, over the next several weeks, the defense is going to try to make you feel sorry for Aiden. They're going to tell you he was bullied. They're going to tell you he was depressed. They're going to tell you that he's just a child who didn't understand what he was doing. But I'm going to present you with evidence, real, concrete evidence that proves otherwise. The evidence will show you that 3 days before this sleepover, Aiden Brooks searched online for how to kill someone quietly. The evidence will show you that 2 days before the sleepover, he searched for, do 12-year-olds go to jail for murder? Nah. The evidence will show you that 1 day before the sleepover, he searched for where to stab someone to kill them fast. Nah. The evidence will show you that on the morning of the sleepover, Aiden wrote in his journal, "Tonight is the night. No more Ethan. No more pain. I know what I have to do. I'm not scared. I'm ready. I'm ready." Yendakar Sadeva lad for. At your Tarzi, at the Yantu, Iver Salsa Shorser. The evidence will show you that Aiden selected a knife from his kitchen, hid it under his bed, and waited. Does that sound like a child who didn't understand what he was doing? Does that sound like an impulsive act? No. Dawi. That is premeditation. That is planning. That is murder in the first degree. Now, you're going to hear about bullying. You're going to hear that Ethan Martinez wasn't perfect, that he teased Aiden, that he made jokes at Aiden's expense. And I'm not going to dispute that. Kids can be cruel to each other. Middle school is a difficult time. But millions of children are bullied. Millions of children experience teasing, exclusion, humiliation. And how many of them commit murder? How many of them plan for days, research methods, and then execute their plan with a knife? Almost none. Because most people, even 12-year-olds, understand that murder is wrong. Most people, even when they're hurt, even when they're angry, don't cross that line. Aiden Brooks crossed that line. The evidence will show you that after the murder, when Aiden's father asked him what happened, Aiden said, "He deserved it." None. War nice. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I didn't mean to." Not, "I don't know what happened." He said, "He deserved it." You were there. Not a tabletty. That is not remorse. That is not a child in shock. That is someone who believes he was justified in taking another human being's life. Ladies and gentlemen, the law recognizes that some crimes are so serious that age alone cannot be an excuse. That's why California law allows juveniles to be tried as adults in certain circumstances. And this is exactly the kind of case the law was designed for. Aiden Brooks planned this murder. He researched it. He prepared for it. He executed it. And then he showed no remorse. At the end of this trial, after you've heard all the evidence, I'm going to ask you to return the only verdict that the evidence supports: guilty of first-degree murder. Not because Aiden is a monster, not because we should have no compassion for children, but because the evidence proves, beyond any reasonable doubt, that he committed premeditated murder. Thank you. Brennan returned to her seat. The courtroom was silent. Several jurors looked shaken. Sarah Connolly, the real estate agent with a 12-year-old son, was blinking back tears. Aiden sat motionless at the defense table, staring at his hands. Judge Hollingsworth turned to the defense. "Mr. Torres, your opening statement." Michael Torres stood. Unlike Brennan, he carried a notepad, though he barely glanced at it. He walked to the jury box and stood directly in front of them, his posture less formal, more conversational. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "everything Ms. Brennan just told you is true. Aiden Brooks did stab Ethan Martinez. He did research online before doing it. He did plan it. He did write in his journal. He did confess. All of those facts are true. But there's something Miss Brennan didn't tell you. Something the prosecution doesn't want you to think about. Aiden Brooks is 12 years old. I know you can see that. You can see him sitting right there looking like a child because he is a child. But I want you to really think about what that means. When you were 12 years old, did you understand the full weight and consequence of your actions? Did you think about how decisions you made would affect you 10, 20, 30 years in the future? Did you have the emotional regulation, the impulse control, the fully developed moral reasoning of an adult? Of course not. Because 12-year-olds are children. Their brains are still developing. The part of the brain responsible for long-term planning, consequence evaluation, impulse control, the prefrontal cortex, doesn't finish developing until the mid-20s. You're going to hear from a neurologist who will explain this in detail, who will show you brain scans, who will tell you that asking a 12-year-old to think like an adult is like asking someone with one arm to do a cartwheel. The capacity simply isn't there yet. But that's not all you're going to hear. You're going to hear from classmates, from teachers, from Aiden's parents, about what Ethan Martinez did to Aiden for 3 years. Ethan was popular, athletic, confident. Aiden was quiet, awkward, socially isolated. Ethan latched onto Aiden, called him his best friend. But what he really did was use Aiden as a target. He mocked Aiden's weight in front of other students. He tripped Aiden in the hallway and laughed. He told other kids that Aiden had crushes on people just to embarrass him. He excluded Aiden from social events unless he needed someone to make fun of. And he always framed it as friendship, as joking. "I'm just messing with you, dude. You know I'm kidding. Don't be so sensitive." This is called relational bullying, and it's one of the most damaging forms of abuse a child can experience. Because it comes from someone who's supposed to be your friend, someone you trust, someone you depend on. Aiden's parents didn't know. They thought Ethan was Aiden's best friend. Teachers didn't intervene because it looked like normal friendship. Even Aiden himself didn't fully understand what was happening to him. But his body understood. His mind understood. And slowly, over 3 years, Aiden developed depression. He developed anxiety. He developed PTSD. You're going to hear from Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a clinical psychologist who evaluated Aiden extensively. She'll tell you that Aiden was suffering from complex post-traumatic stress disorder, a condition that develops from prolonged, repeated trauma. She'll tell you that Aiden felt hopeless, trapped, like there was no escape from the pain Ethan was causing him. And on September 23, 2017, Aiden broke into it. Now, does that excuse what he did? No. Date. Does that mean he shouldn't be held accountable? No. But it means this is not the cold, calculated, adult-level murder the prosecution wants you to believe it is. This is a child who was being tortured psychologically and who reached a breaking point. This is a child whose brain wasn't developed enough to see alternatives, to think through consequences, to regulate his emotion. The prosecution wants you to look at the Google searches and the journal entry and conclude that this proves premeditation. But I want you to consider another interpretation. Those searches and that journal entry were a cry for help. They were a child processing unbearable pain in the only way he knew how. Did anyone help him? Did any adult see the warning signs and intervene? No. The school counselor recommended therapy. Aiden's parents didn't follow through because they didn't understand how serious it was. Teachers saw Ethan teasing Aiden, but dismissed it as boys being boys. Aiden himself tried to tell his parents things weren't okay, but he didn't have the words to explain what was really happening. And so a child was left to suffer. And eventually, he broke. Ladies and gentlemen, at the end of this trial, I'm going to ask you to return a verdict that acknowledges the complexity of what happened here. That acknowledges that a 12-year-old child is not the same as an adult. That acknowledges that chronic bullying and mental illness are real, and that they matter. The prosecution is asking you to convict Aiden of first-degree murder. But the evidence will show that this wasn't premeditated murder. It was a traumatized child who snapped. At most, this is second-degree murder. But even that may be too severe given Aiden's age, his mental state, and the circumstances that led to this tragedy. I'm asking you to see Aiden as what he is, a child who needed help and didn't get it. A child who made a terrible, irreversible mistake. A child who deserves accountability, but also compassion and the possibility of rehabilitation. Thank you. Torres returned to his seat. The jury looked conflicted. Some nodded sympathetically. Others looked skeptical. Kenneth Lawson, the retired police officer, was shaking his head slightly. Judge Hollingsworth looked at the clock. We'll take a 15-minute recess. When we return, the prosecution will call its first witness. The jury filed out. The gallery erupted in hushed conversations. Rosa Martinez was crying quietly. Miguel held her hand, his jaw clenched. Jason and Linda Brooks looked at their son, who still stared straight ahead, showing no emotion. In 15 minutes, the real battle would begin. The prosecution's case. Witness testimony. Over the next 2 weeks, Rachel Brennan methodically built her case, witness by witness, piece of evidence by piece of evidence. She called 21 witnesses in total. What follows are the most critical testimonies. Witness hash 1. Detective Maria Santos. Detective Santos took the stand at 10:45 a.m. on March 17. She wore her dress uniform and had testified in court many times before. But this case was different. This was a 12-year-old defendant. Brennan. Detective Santos. Please state your name and occupation for the record. Santos. Maria Santos. I'm a detective with the Riverside Police Department, Homicide Division. I've been a detective for 15 years. Brennan. Were you the lead investigator in the death of Ethan Martinez? Santos. Yes, I was. Brennan. Can you tell the jury how you became involved in this case? Santos. I was called to 4521 Oak Ridge Lane at approximately 4:15 a.m. on September 24, 2017. I was informed that there had been a homicide involving a juvenile victim and a juvenile suspect. Brennan. What did you find when you arrived? Santos. I found a crime scene in the basement of the residence. A 12-year-old male victim, later identified as Ethan Martinez, was deceased on the floor. He had sustained multiple stab wounds. A kitchen knife was recovered near the body. The scene indicated a violent struggle. Brennan. What did you do next? Santos. I examined the scene, took photographs, coordinated with the crime scene investigators. Then I interviewed the suspect, Aiden Brooks, who was being held in a patrol car outside. Brennan. Can you describe that interview? Santos. Aiden was sitting in the back of the car with his parents present. I read him his Miranda rights, which he said he understood. I asked him what happened. He told me, and I'm quoting directly, I killed Ethan. Brennan. What else did he say? Santos. I asked him why, and he said, because he deserved it. He made my life hell. Brennan. Did he explain how he killed Ethan? Santos. Yes. He said he stabbed him. When I asked if he had planned it, he said yes. When I asked if he had obtained the knife in advance, he said yes, that he had taken it from the kitchen that morning and hidden it under his bed. Brennan. Detective Santos, in your 15 years as a homicide investigator, have you ever encountered a case quite like this? Santos. No one will. Never. Brennan. What made this case different? Santos. The age of both the victim and the suspect, and the level of planning involved. This wasn't a spontaneous fight that escalated. This was premeditated. Brennan. How do you know it was premeditated? Santos. The suspect told me he planned it. He researched methods online. He obtained a weapon in advance. He waited for the victim to be vulnerable, and his journal entry, written the morning of the murder, explicitly stated his intent. Brennan. Thank you, Detective. No further questions. Judge Hollingsworth. Mr. Torres, your witness. Michael Torres stood and approached the witness stand. Torres. Detective Santos, when you interviewed Aiden, you said his parents were present, correct? Santos. Yes. Torres. And Aiden was upset, wasn't he? Santos. He appeared calm. Torres. But his parents were crying, weren't they? Santos. Yes. Torres. And Aiden had just witnessed his friend die, correct? Santos. He had just killed his friend. Torres. But from Aiden's perspective, he had just experienced a traumatic event, correct? Santos. I suppose. Torres. And you're aware that trauma can cause people to appear calm or detached, even when they're in shock, correct? Santos. Yes, that's possible. Torres. Detective, you testified that Aiden said he planned this. But did you ask him specifically how long he'd been planning it? Santos. He said a few days. Torres. A few days. Not months. Not years. A few days. Santos. Correct. D. To Y. Torres. And you're aware that a few days for a 12-year-old is very different from a few days for an adult, aren't you? That children have a different sense of time and planning. Brennan. Objection. Calls for speculation outside the witness's expertise. Judge Hollingsworth. Sustained. Torres. Detective, did you investigate the bullying allegations? Did you interview classmates about Ethan's behavior toward Aiden? Santos. Yes, we did. Torres. And what did you find? Santos. Multiple classmates confirmed that Ethan teased Aiden frequently. Torres. More than teasing, wasn't it? Classmates described Ethan mocking Aiden's weight, tripping him, humiliating him in front of others, correct? Santos. Yes, some described those behaviors. Torres. And yet, no action was ever taken by the school to stop it, was it? Santos. Not to my knowledge. Torres. So Aiden was being victimized for years, and no adults helped him. Isn't that correct? Brennan. Objection. Argumentative. Judge Hollingsworth. Sustained. Torres. No further question. Witness #4. Dr. Raymond Chen, medical examiner. Dr. Chen took the stand on March 19. His testimony would be the most difficult for the jury to hear. Brennan. Dr. Chen, did you perform the autopsy on Ethan Martinez? Dr. Chen. Yes, I did. Brennan, can you describe your findings? Dr. Chen. Ethan Martinez died from multiple sharp force injuries, specifically 37 stab wounds. Several jurors gasped. Angela Morrison, the stay-at-home mother, covered her mouth. Brennan, can you describe the location of these wounds? Dr. Chen. 19 wounds were to the torso, chest, abdomen, and back. 7 wounds were to the neck and throat. 5 wounds were to the arms, consistent with defensive injuries. 4 wounds were to the legs. 2 wounds were to the face. Brennan. What do defensive injuries indicate? Dr. Chen. They indicate that the victim was conscious during the attack and tried to defend himself. In this case, Ethan had cuts on his palms and fingers, consistent with grabbing the blade to try to stop it. Brennan. Was he awake when the attack began? Dr. Chen. Based on the pattern of injuries, I believe the first wound occurred while he was sleeping or just waking up. But he woke up quickly and tried to fight back. Brennan. How long would this attack have taken? Dr. Chen. Based on the number of wounds and the pattern, I estimate 2 to 3 minutes, possibly longer. Brennan. So this wasn't a single blow. This was a sustained attack. Dr. Chen. Yes. 37 wounds requires sustained effort. Brennan. Which wound killed him? Dr. Chen. The cause of death was exsanguination, blood loss from multiple wounds. Several wounds individually could have been fatal, particularly the wounds to the neck and chest, but it was the cumulative blood loss that killed him. Brennan? Dr. Chen? Would Ethan have suffered? Dr. Chen. Yes. He would have been conscious for at least part of the attack. He would have experienced pain and fear. Rosa Martinez let out a sob from the gallery. Judge Hollingsworth did not admonish her. Brennan. Thank you, Doctor. No further questions. The cross-examination by Torres was brief. There was no disputing the medical evidence. Torres asked only a few questions to establish that the attack showed rage rather than cold calculation, but the impact of the testimony remained devastating. Witness #7. FBI Special Agent David Park, Digital Forensics. Agent Park took the stand on March 24. His testimony would provide the most damning evidence of premeditation. Brennan. Agent Park, what is your area of expertise? Park. I'm a digital forensics analyst with the FBI. I specialize in recovering and analyzing digital evidence from computers, tablets, phones, and other devices. Brennan. Did you examine Aiden Brooks's tablet? Park. Yes, I did. Brennan. What did you find? Park. I found a series of internet searches conducted in the 3 days before the murder. Brennan. Can you describe those searches? Park. On September 20th, 2017, 3 days before the murder, Aiden searched for how to kill someone quietly at 9:47 p.m. Monday. Brennan. What else? Park. On September 21st, he searched for "Do 12-year-olds go to jail for murder" at 8:33 p.m. Brennan. And on September 22, Park. On September 22nd, the day before the murder, he searched for where to stab someone to kill them fast at 10:15 p.m. Brennan. Agent Park, in your professional opinion, what do these searches indicate? Park. They indicate planning and premeditation. Someone researching methods of killing, consequences of killing, and specific techniques for killing is preparing to commit murder. Brennan. Did you find anything else on the tablet? Park. Yes. I found text messages between Aiden and a classmate named Derek Chen. Brennan. What did those messages say? Park. On September 20th, 3 days before the murder, Aiden sent Derek a message saying, "I wish Ethan would just disappear." Brennan. Thank you, Agent. No further questions. Torres's cross-examination attempted to reframe the searches as fantasy rather than planning, but Agent Park held firm. In my 20 years of digital forensics, I've analyzed hundreds of devices belonging to killers. These searches are consistent with someone planning to commit murder, not fantasizing about. Witness #12. Classmate testimony. Sofia Martinez, no relation to victim. Sofia Martinez was a 13-year-old 7th grader who had classes with both Aiden and Ethan. She testified on March 23rd. Brennan. Sofia. Did you know Aiden Brooks and Ethan Martinez? Sofia. Yes. We had English and math together. Brennan. Were they friends? Sofia. Everyone thought they were. But I don't think they really were. Brennan. Why do you say that? Sofia. Ethan was mean to Aiden. He would make jokes about Aiden being fat. He would trip him in the hallway. He would embarrass him in front of people. Brennan. Did Aiden ever stand up for himself? Sofia. Not really. He would just laugh it off or stay quiet. Brennan. Did you ever hear Aiden threaten Ethan? Sofia. Not threaten, but he told me once that he wished Ethan would leave him alone. Brennan. When was that? Sofia. Maybe a week before it happened. Brennan. Did you tell anyone? Sofia. No, but I didn't think it was serious. Brennan. Thank you, Sofia. Torres's cross-examination focused on establishing the severity of the bullying. Torres. Sofia, you said Ethan was mean to Aiden. Can you give specific examples? Sofia. He would call Aiden fatty in front of people. He would laugh when Aiden got answers wrong in class. Once he took Aiden's lunch and threw it in the trash. Taurus. Did teachers see this? Sophia. Sometimes. But they just told Ethan to stop. They didn't really do anything. Taurus. Did Aiden seem sad or upset? Sophia. Yeah. He always seemed sad. Taurus. Thank you, Sophia. The prosecution rested on March 28 after presenting evidence from the crime scene. Aiden's confession, digital evidence, the journal entry, and testimony from classmates, teachers, and Aiden's parents. The case against Aiden seemed overwhelming. Premeditation, confession, physical evidence, motive. Now it was the defense's turn to try to save him. The defense's case. Michael Torres called 12 witnesses over 6 days. His strategy was clear. He couldn't dispute what Aiden did, so he had to change how the jury understood why Aiden did it. Defense witness #1, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, clinical psychologist. Dr. Mitchell was Torres's most important witness. She had evaluated Aiden 6 times between October 2017 and February 2018. Torres. Dr. Mitchell. What is your professional background? Dr. Mitchell. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist with a specialty in child and adolescent psychology. I've been practicing for 22 years. Torres. Did you evaluate Aiden Brooks? Dr. Mitchell. Yes. I conducted 6 evaluation sessions with him over a period of 4 months. Torres. What was your diagnosis? Dr. Mitchell. Aiden meets the diagnostic criteria for major depressive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and generalized anxiety disorder. Torres. Can you explain what caused these conditions? Dr. Mitchell. Aiden experienced chronic bullying over a period of approximately 3 years. This bullying was particularly insidious because it came from someone he believed was his friend. This created a condition called betrayal trauma, where the victim feels trapped because they depend on the person who's hurting them. Torres. How did this affect Aiden? Dr. Mitchell. Aiden developed severe depression. He felt hopeless, worthless, trapped. He experienced intrusive thoughts of harming himself or others, which are a symptom of PTSD. He had difficulty sleeping, concentrating, and regulating his emotions. Torres. Did Aiden reach out for help? Dr. Mitchell. He tried. He told his parents things weren't okay, but he didn't have the language to explain what was really happening. The school counselor recommended therapy, but his parents didn't follow through because they didn't understand the severity. Torres. Dr. Mitchell, in your professional opinion, was Aiden capable of understanding the full consequences of his actions on September 23, 2017? Brennan. Objection. That's a legal question. Judge Hollingsworth. Sustained. Torres. Let me rephrase. Dr. Mitchell, given Aiden's mental state and his age, was he thinking clearly on September 23? Dr. Mitchell. No do I. I believe Aiden was in a dissociative state. The chronic trauma, combined with adolescent brain development, created a situation where Aiden could not fully process what he was doing or appreciate the finality of death. Torres. Thank you, Doctor. Brennan's cross-examination was aggressive. Brennan. Dr. Mitchell, you testified that Aiden was in a dissociative state, but he was able to conduct Google searches, hide a weapon, wait for his victim to be asleep. Does that sound like someone who's not thinking clearly? Dr. Mitchell. Dissociation doesn't mean complete cognitive impairment. Brennan. He wrote in his journal, I'm not scared. I'm ready. Does that sound like someone who doesn't understand what they're doing? Dr. Mitchell. That could be interpreted as psychological preparation. Brennan. Or it could be interpreted as cold-blooded planning, couldn't it? Dr. Mitchell. I don't believe that's the correct interpretation given his age and mental state. Brennan. But it's possible, isn't it? Dr. Mitchell. A pause. It's possible. Brennan. Thank you, Doctor. Defense witness #5. Dr. James Keller, neurologist. Dr. Keller testified about adolescent brain development. Taurus. Dr. Keller, can you explain how a 12-year-old's brain is different from an adult's brain? Dr. Keller, the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for impulse control, long-term planning, and consequence evaluation, doesn't fully develop until the mid-20s. At age 12, this part of the brain is significantly underdeveloped. Taurus, what does that mean in practical terms? Dr. Keller, it means that 12-year-olds are more impulsive, less able to think through consequences, more influenced by emotion, and less capable of abstract moral reasoning than adults. Taurus. So when Aiden researched methods of killing online, is it possible he wasn't thinking this will result in life in prison? That he was focused on the immediate goal of ending his pain? Dr. Keller, absolutely. Children focus on the present. They don't have the capacity to fully envision future consequences. Brennan, objection, Doc. Speculation. Judge Hollingsworth, overruled. The witness is offering expert opinion. Taurus. Thank you, Doctor. On cross, Brennan got Dr. Keller to admit that many 12-year-olds do understand that murder is wrong and that brain development doesn't excuse all behavior. Defense witness hash 8. Aiden's parents, Jason and Linda Brooks. Both parents testified tearfully about their son's personality changes in the months before the murder. Linda Brooks. He used to be so happy. He loved reading, drawing. But in 7th grade, he became withdrawn. He stopped eating. He stopped talking to us. Taurus. Did you know he was being bullied? Linda. Not really. He mentioned that Ethan teased him sometimes, but he always said they were friends. I didn't know it was serious. Taurus. Do you wish you had done something differently? Linda. Crying. Every day. Every single day I wish I had seen it. I wish I had helped him. The prosecution chose not to cross-examine the parents, not wanting to appear cruel. Defense witness hash 12. Aiden Brooks. On April 3, 2018, Aiden took the stand. It was a massive risk, but Taurus believed the jury needed to hear from Aiden himself. Aiden was sworn in. He looked small in the witness chair, his feet barely touching the floor. Taurus. Aiden, can you tell the jury about your friendship with Ethan? Aiden. Quiet voice, he wasn't really my friend. Taurus. What do you mean? Aiden. Everyone thought we were friends, but he was mean to me. He called me names. He made fun of me in front of people. He made me feel like I was nothing. Taurus. Why didn't you tell anyone? Aiden. I tried, but nobody believed me. Or they said, boys will be boys. Or they said Ethan was just joking. Taurus. How did that make you feel? Aiden. Trapped. Like there was no way out. Taurus. Aiden. Why did you invite Ethan over that night? Aiden. He asked if he could come over. I said yes. I always said yes. Taurus. When did you decide to hurt him? Aiden. Crying. I don't know. I kept thinking about it. I kept thinking, I just want him to stop. And then that night, he was asleep, and I just wanted the pain to stop. Taurus. Do you understand what you did? Aiden. Yes. I killed him. I know I can never take it back. Taurus. Do you regret it? Aiden. Every second. Every single second. I wish I could go back. I wish I had told someone. I wish I had asked for help. Taurus. Thank you, Aiden. Then Rachel Brennan stood for cross-examination. Brennan. Aiden. You testified that you wanted the pain to stop, but you didn't ask your parents for help, did you? Aiden. I tried. Brennan. You didn't tell a teacher that you were thinking about hurting Ethan, did you? Aiden. No, thou share. Brennan. You didn't call a suicide hotline or a counselor or any adult, did you? Aiden. No, oh. Brennan. But you did Google how to kill someone quietly, didn't you? Aiden. Crying. Yes. Brennan. And you wrote in your journal, tonight is the night. I'm not scared. I'm ready, didn't you? Aiden. Yes. Brennan. You hid a knife under your bed and waited for Ethan to fall asleep, didn't you? Aiden. Yes. Brennan. And when he was asleep and vulnerable, you stabbed him. Not once. Not twice. 37 times. Is that correct? Aiden. Sobbing. Yes. I know. I know what I did. Brennan. You said you wanted the pain to stop. But Ethan felt pain too, didn't he? He woke up. He tried to fight back. He grabbed the knife with his hands, trying to stop you. And you kept stabbing him. Didn't you? Aiden. Incoherent. Crying. Taurus. Objection. Your Honor. Counsel is badgering the witness. Judge Hollingsworth. Sustain. Miss Brennan, move on. Brennan. No further question. Aiden was led back to the defense table, barely able to walk. His parents were crying. Several jurors were crying. The defense rested. Closing arguments. April 5, 2018. After 3 weeks of testimony, 21 prosecution witnesses, and 12 defense witnesses, the case came down to this: 2 attorneys, 2 interpretations of the same facts, and 12 jurors who would decide whether a 12-year-old boy would spend the rest of his life in prison. Rachel Brennan approached the jury box first. She had spent the previous night reviewing every piece of evidence, every testimony, preparing her final argument. She knew the jury was conflicted. She could see it in their faces. They didn't want to convict a child. But she needed them to focus on what that child had done. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Brennan began, her voice firm but not aggressive. 3 weeks ago, I stood in this same spot and told you that Aiden Brooks planned to murder Ethan Martinez. I told you that he researched methods online. I told you that he obtained a weapon and hid it. I told you that he waited for his victim to be vulnerable and then stabbed him 37 times. And over the past 3 weeks, the evidence has proven every single one of those things beyond any reasonable doubt. You heard Detective Santos testify that Aiden confessed immediately. He said, I killed Ethan. He deserved it. Not I'm sorry. Not I didn't mean to. He said Ethan deserved to die. You heard Agent Park testify about the Google searches, how to kill someone quietly, where to stab someone to kill them fast. Those aren't the searches of someone fantasizing. Those are the searches of someone planning. You heard Dr. Chen, the medical examiner, describe 37 stab wounds, 19 to the torso, 7 to the neck, 5 defensive wounds where Ethan tried to grab the knife and stop it. This wasn't a single blow in a moment of rage. This was a sustained, deliberate attack that lasted several minutes. You saw the journal entry, written the morning of the murder. Tonight is the night. No more Ethan. No more pain. I know what I have to do. I'm not scared. I'm ready. I'm ready. Right here, with Shula. Those are the words of someone who has made a decision. Someone who is prepared. Someone who is not acting impulsively. Now, the defense wants you to focus on bullying. They want you to believe that Aiden was so victimized, so traumatized, that he had no choice but to kill. But let me ask you this. How many children are bullied every year? Hundreds of thousands. Maybe millions. How many of those children commit murder? Almost none. Because most children, even when they're hurt, even when they're scared, even when they feel trapped, understand that murder is wrong. Most children, when they're in pain, ask for help. They tell a parent, a teacher, a counselor. They don't Google how to kill someone quietly. The defense presented Dr. Mitchell, who testified about depression and PTSD. And I don't dispute that Aiden was depressed. I don't dispute that he felt bad. But depression doesn't equal a license to kill. Mental illness doesn't erase personal responsibility. Dr. Mitchell admitted on cross-examination that Aiden knew right from wrong. She admitted that he understood what he was doing. The defense presented Dr. Keller, who testified about adolescent brain development. And yes, 12-year-olds don't think exactly like adults. But we're not asking Aiden to think like an adult. We're asking him to meet a very basic standard. Don't murder people. 12-year-olds understand that murder is wrong. Ask any 12-year-old, is it okay to stab someone 37 times? And they'll tell you no. Aiden knew it was wrong. That's why he hid the knife. That's why he waited until Ethan was asleep. That's why he researched whether 12-year-olds go to jail for murder. He knew. And when you know something is wrong, and you plan it anyway, and you do it anyway, that's called murder in the first degree. Now, I want to address something the defense has implied throughout this trial. That somehow, convicting Aiden means we have no compassion for children, that we don't understand trauma, that we're being cruel. That's not true. This jury can have compassion for Aiden and still hold him accountable. You can acknowledge that he was bullied and still recognize that murder is not an acceptable response to bullying. You can feel sorry for him and still do your duty under the law. Because if we say that bullying justifies murder, what are we saying to every other child who's being bullied right now? What are we saying to the victims of bullying who don't commit murder? We're saying their pain matters less because they didn't cross the line into violence. And what are we saying to Ethan Martinez's family? What are we saying to Rosa and Miguel, who will never see their son graduate high school, go to college, get married, have children? What are we saying to Isabella, who lost her little brother? We're saying that their son's life didn't matter as much as Aiden's pain. Ladies and gentlemen, the law exists to protect all of us. And the law says that if you plan to kill someone, if you obtain a weapon, if you wait for the right moment, and if you execute that plan, that's first-degree murder. It doesn't matter if you're 12 or 42. It doesn't matter if you were bullied or privileged. The act is the same. The intent is the same. The result is the same. A child is dead, and the person who killed him is sitting right there. I'm asking you to follow the evidence. I'm asking you to follow the law. And I'm asking you to return the only verdict that the evidence supports, guilty of first-degree murder. Not because we're cruel, not because we don't care about children, but because justice demands it, because Ethan Martinez deserves it, and because the law requires it. Thank you. Brennan returned to her seat. The courtroom was silent. Several jurors looked shaken. Patricia Delgado, the foreperson, was taking notes furiously. Judge Hollingsworth turned to the defense table. Mr. Torres, your closing argument. Michael Torres stood slowly. He looked exhausted. 3 weeks of trial, dozens of witnesses, the weight of a child's life resting on his shoulders. He walked to the jury box and stood before them, his expression grave. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, Ms. Brennan just gave you a very compelling argument. She presented the facts clearly and logically, and I'm not going to dispute most of what she said. Yes, Aiden killed Ethan. Yes, he researched online. Yes, he wrote in his journal. Yes, he hid the knife. All of those facts are true. But there's something Ms. Brennan didn't address in her closing argument. Something the prosecution has avoided throughout this entire trial. Aiden Brooks is 12 years old. I know I keep saying that. I know I've said it dozens of times over the past 3 weeks, but I need you to really truly understand what that means. 12 years old is 7th grade. It's braces and growth spurts and awkward social dynamics. It's a brain that's still developing, emotions that are still forming, a sense of self that's still being built. When Ms. Brennan asks, how many bullied children commit murder, she's asking the wrong question. The right question is, how many 12-year-old children who are bullied every day for 3 years, who develop PTSD and depression, who have no support system, who reach out for help and are ignored, how many of those children reach a breaking point? The answer is, we don't know. Because most children don't experience that level of sustained trauma. And thank God for that. But Aiden did. You heard from Dr. Mitchell, a clinical psychologist with 22 years of experience. She diagnosed Aiden with major depressive disorder, PTSD, and generalized anxiety disorder. She explained that Aiden experienced betrayal trauma where someone you trust and depend on is the source of your pain. That's one of the most damaging psychological experiences a person can have. You heard from Dr. Keller, a neurologist, who explained that the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for impulse control and consequence evaluation, doesn't fully develop until the mid-20s. Aiden's brain, at age 12, was literally incapable of processing long-term consequences the way an adult brain does. You heard from classmates who described years of bullying, name-calling, physical harassment, public humiliation. You heard that Aiden tried to tell adults, but nothing was done. And you heard from Aiden himself. You saw him break down on the stand. You heard him say, "I wish I had asked for help. I wish I could take it back." Does that sound like a cold-blooded killer? Or does that sound like a child who made a terrible, irreversible mistake? Ms. Weier. Brennan said that mental illness doesn't erase responsibility. And she's right. I'm not asking you to say Aiden isn't responsible. I'm asking you to say that a 12-year-old child cannot be held to the same standard as an adult. The prosecution charged Aiden with first-degree murder. First-degree murder requires premeditation, cold, calculated planning with a clear mind. But the evidence shows that Aiden was not thinking clearly. He was a traumatized child in crisis. The Google searches, they weren't the product of calculation, they were a cry for help that no one heard. The journal entry? It wasn't a murder plan, it was a child processing unbearable pain in the only way he knew how. The act itself? It wasn't cold-blooded execution, it was a child who snapped after years of torture. If you believe that Aiden planned this with the same level of intent and understanding as an adult would, then yes, you should convict him of first-degree murder. But if you have any reasonable doubt that this was a child in crisis, acting impulsively despite some surface-level planning, then you should consider a lesser charge. Second-degree murder, char. Manslaughter, something that acknowledges the complexity of what happened here. Because this wasn't a gang member killing a rival. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This wasn't a psychopath torturing animals and escalating to humans. This was a 12-year-old boy who was drowning and saw no way out. Miss Riverside. Brennan asked what we're saying to other bullied children if we show mercy to Aiden. I'll tell you what we're saying. We're saying that we see your pain. We're saying that adults failed you, and we're sorry. We're saying that you deserve help, not punishment. And to Ethan's family, we're saying, your son's death was a tragedy. It never should have happened. And if adults had intervened, if teachers had stopped the bullying, if the school counselor's recommendation for therapy had been followed, maybe Ethan would still be alive. Aiden didn't kill Ethan in a vacuum. This tragedy was the result of systemic failures, schools that don't take bullying seriously, parents who don't recognize warning signs, a society that tells boys to toughen up instead of seeking help. Aiden should be held accountable, but accountability doesn't have to mean life in prison. It can mean rehabilitation. It can mean treatment. It can mean giving a child a chance to become someone different. Ladies and gentlemen, at the end of deliberations, you're going to ask yourselves, what is justice in this case? Is justice convicting a 12-year-old as harshly as we would convict an adult? Or is justice acknowledging that children are different, that trauma is real, that mental illness matters, and that sometimes the most broken among us need help, not condemnation? I'm asking you to return a verdict of second-degree murder at most, or manslaughter, or even acquittal if you believe Aiden was so impaired that he couldn't form the intent required for murder. I'm asking you to see Aiden as what he is, a child who needed help and didn't get it, a child who made a terrible mistake, a child who deserves a chance at redemption. Thank you. Torres returned to his seat. The courtroom was silent, except for the sound of quiet crying from both families. Judge Hollingsworth looked at the clock. It was 3:47 p.m. We will recess for the day, he said. Tomorrow morning at 9:00 a.m., I will provide jury instructions, and you will begin deliberations. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell. Jury instructions and deliberation begins, April 6, 2018. At 9:00 a.m. on April 6, Judge Hollingsworth read the jury instructions a dense legalistic explanation of the law that would govern their deliberations. Ladies and gentlemen, you have heard all the evidence in this case. Now, it is your duty to decide the facts. You must follow the law as I explain it to you, even if you disagree with it. The defendant is charged with murder in the first degree. To prove this crime, the prosecution must prove beyond a reasonable doubt: 1. That the defendant committed an act that caused the death of another person. 2. That the defendant acted with malice aforethought. 3. That the killing was willful, deliberate, and premeditated. Malice aforethought means the defendant intended to kill. Willful means intentional. Deliberate means formed or arrived at carefully. Premeditated means considered beforehand. If you find that the prosecution has not proven premeditation beyond a reasonable doubt, you may consider the lesser included offense of second-degree murder, which requires malice but not premeditation. If you find that the defendant acted in the heat of passion upon sufficient provocation, you may consider the lesser included offense of voluntary manslaughter. The defendant's age is not a defense to the crime, but you may consider it when evaluating his ability to form intent and premeditate. You must unanimously agree on a verdict. If you cannot reach a unanimous decision, you must inform me. You may now retire to deliberate. At 9:47 a.m., the jury retired to the deliberation room. The jury deliberates 11 hours and 23 minutes. The deliberation room was small and windowless, with a large rectangular table, 12 chairs, a whiteboard, and a water cooler. The jurors filed in carrying their notepads, the weight of their responsibility evident on their faces. Patricia Delgado, the retired nurse who had been elected foreperson, sat at the head of the table. She was 58 years old, a mother of 3, and grandmother of 5 wives. She had seen a lot in her nursing career: suffering, death, difficult choices. But this was different. This was deciding the fate of a child. "Okay," Patricia said, her voice steady. "Let's start with a preliminary vote, just to see where everyone stands. We don't have to discuss yet, just a show of hands. How many believe Aiden is guilty of first-degree murder?" 3 hands went up. Kenneth Lawson, the retired police officer, Marcus Webb, the construction foreman, and James Preston, the IT consultant. How many believe he's guilty of second-degree murder? 4 hands. Patricia herself, Jennifer Juan, the software engineer, Christina Valdez, the paralegal, and Robert Santos, the retired teacher. How many believe manslaughter? 2 hands. Angela Morrison, the stay-at-home mother, and Maria Gutierrez, the elementary school teacher. How many believe not guilty? 1 hand. Sarah Connolly, the real estate agent with a 12-year-old son. 2 jurors didn't raise their hands: David Kim, the accountant, and Thomas Reed, the postal worker. David, Thomas, you didn't vote. Where are you leaning? Patricia asked. David Kim spoke first. I'm between first and second degree. I need to talk it through. Thomas Reed nodded. Same. I'm not sure. Okay, Patricia said. Let's talk. Who wants to start? Kenneth Lawson, the retired cop, spoke first. I think this is clearly first-degree murder. The kid planned it. He researched online. He hid the knife. He waited for the victim to be asleep. That's textbook premeditation. But he's 12, Angela Morrison said, her voice trembling. He's a child. Children don't think like adults. Being 12 doesn't give you a free pass to commit murder, Kenneth replied. Plenty of 12-year-olds know murder is wrong. Of course they know it's wrong in the abstract, Maria Gutierrez, the teacher, said. But knowing something intellectually and being able to control your behavior are 2 different things. I work with kids this age every day. Their impulse control is terrible. They do things without thinking through consequences. But he did think through consequences, James Preston said. He searched 2 12-year-olds go to jail for murder. That shows he was thinking about what would happen. Or it shows he was scared and confused, Sarah Connolly said. I had a 12-year-old son. If he were in pain, if he felt trapped, I could see him doing research online without really understanding what he was doing. Kids Google things. It doesn't always mean they're planning something. Marcus Webb shook his head. With all due respect, ma'am, your son hasn't stabbed anyone. This kid did. 37 times. That's sustained violence. That's sustained violence. Sustained rage, Robert Santos corrected. There's a difference between calculated violence and rage. The number of wounds suggests he lost control. Not that he was coldly executing a plan, but he planned to kill him before he lost control, Marcus argued. He didn't just happen to have a knife. He got it that morning and hid it. That's premeditation. I think we need to talk about the bullying, Christina Valdez said. Multiple witnesses testified that Ethan tormented Aiden for years. That has to matter. It matters, Kenneth Lawson said, but it doesn't justify murder. Lots of kids get bullied. They don't kill people. Most bullied kids have support, Maria Gutierrez countered. Aiden didn't. The school counselor recommended therapy. The parents didn't follow through. Teachers saw the bullying and did nothing. He was completely alone. That's tragic, Kenneth said, but it's not a legal defense. It's not a defense, Patricia Delgado interjected, but it is context. The judge instructed us to consider Aiden's age when evaluating his ability to form intent and premeditate. I think the bullying is part of that context. I agree, Jennifer Huang said. I think he intended to kill Ethan, but I don't think he premeditated it the way an adult would. I think he was a kid in crisis who fixated on this as a solution without really understanding the finality of death or the consequences for himself. That's second-degree murder, Patricia said. Intent without premeditation. I'm not sure I agree, David Kim said. The journal entry tonight is the night. I'm not scared. I'm ready. That sounds like someone who has made a decision and is prepared to execute it. That sounds like premeditation to me. Or it sounds like a 12-year-old trying to psyche himself up to do something he's terrified of, Sarah Connolly said. Have you ever read a middle schooler's diary? They're full of dramatic declarations that don't mean what an adult would mean by the same words. But this wasn't a diary entry about asking someone to a dance, James Preston said. This was about murder, and then he actually did it. The debate continued for hours. They reviewed the evidence piece by piece. They discussed the Google searches, the journal entry, the confession, the testimony from Dr. Mitchell and Dr. Keller, the bullying evidence. At 2:00 p.m., they broke for lunch, eating sandwiches in silence, each lost in thought. At 3:00 p.m., they resumed deliberations. Let's focus on the legal definitions, Patricia said. First-degree murder requires premeditation. The judge defined that as considered beforehand. The question is, did Aiden consider this beforehand in the way that term is meant legally? He researched methods, Kenneth said. That's consideration. But he's 12, Angela repeated. Can a 12-year-old really consider something in the legal sense? Or is he just reacting to pain? I think he considered it, David Kim said slowly. But I also think his consideration was impaired by his age and mental state. So I'm landing on second-degree murder. He intended to kill, but the premeditation wasn't mature or sophisticated. I agree, Thomas Reed said, speaking for the first time in hours. Second degree. I can't go higher than manslaughter, Angela Morrison said. I think this was a heat of passion situation. Years of provocation, and he snapped. Heat of passion requires immediate provocation, Kenneth argued. Not something that happened over years. The law is clear on that. Then maybe the law is wrong, Angela said quietly. We don't get to decide if the law is wrong, Kenneth replied. We have to apply the law as it exists. They debated for 3 more hours. Patricia drew a chart on the whiteboard showing the elements of each crime and how the evidence fit. At 6:30 p.m., they took another vote. First-degree murder, 2 votes, Kenneth Marcus. Second-degree murder, 7 votes. Patricia, Jennifer, Christina, Robert, David, Thomas, James. Manslaughter, 2 votes, Angela, Maria. Not guilty. 1 vote, Sarah. Sarah, can you explain your position? Patricia asked gently. Sarah Connolly's eyes filled with tears. I have a son his age, and I keep thinking, what if my son were in that much pain and I didn't see it? What if he made a terrible mistake? Would I want a jury to send him to prison for life? I know the law says age isn't a defense, but I can't in good conscience convict a 12-year-old child of murder. I just can't. I understand, Patricia said. But Sarah, if we can't reach a unanimous verdict, there will be a mistrial. Aiden will be tried again. The Martinez family will have to go through this again. Is that what you want? Sarah closed her eyes. No. Bullied. Can you consider second-degree murder? It still holds him accountable, but it acknowledges that he's a child. Sarah nodded slowly. Maybe. Let me think. At 7:45 p.m., they discussed the difference between second-degree murder and manslaughter at length. Maria and Angela remained convinced that the bullying constituted sufficient provocation for a heat-of-passion crime. But Patricia argued, the law defines heat of passion as an immediate reaction to provocation. A reasonable person would not immediately react to years of bullying by committing murder. I think the years of build-up actually support premeditation, not heat of passion. But he's not a reasonable person, Maria said. He's a traumatized child. Then that makes it second-degree murder, Patricia replied. Not manslaughter. At 8:30 p.m., they took another vote. Second-degree murder, 10 votes. Manslaughter, 2 votes. Angela Maria. Angela Maria, Patricia said. I understand your position, but we need to reach a verdict. Can you live with second-degree murder? Angela wiped her eyes. If it means he won't be sentenced as harshly as first-degree, then yes. Maria Gutierrez looked at Aiden's empty chair in her mind, seeing the faces of her students, imagining one of them sitting there. Yes, I can live with it. At 9:10 p.m., Patricia knocked on the door and informed the bailiff that they had reached a verdict. At 9:25 p.m., the jury sent word to Judge Hollingsworth. They were ready. The verdict, April 6, 2018, 9:47 p.m. The courtroom filled quickly. Despite the late hour, word had spread that a verdict was imminent. Journalists rushed from nearby restaurants. The families, who had been waiting in separate rooms, were brought in. Rosa Martinez clutched a rosary, her lips moving in silent prayer. Miguel held her hand, his jaw set. Jason and Linda Brooks held each other, their faces pale with fear. Aiden was brought in from a holding room. He looked small and frightened as he sat between his attorneys. At 9:47 p.m., Judge Hollingsworth took the bench. All rise. Everyone stood. Please be seated. I understand the jury has reached a verdict. Will the foreperson please stand? Patricia Delgado stood, holding the verdict form. Her hand trembled slightly. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. Please hand the verdict form to the bailiff. The bailiff walked to the jury box, took the form from Patricia, and carried it to Judge Hollingsworth. The judge reviewed it in silence, his expression revealing nothing. Then he handed it back to the bailiff, who returned it to Patricia. Will the defendant please rise? Aiden stood, flanked by his attorneys. Michael Torres put a hand on Aiden's shoulder. Aiden's legs shook. Ah? Members of the jury in the matter of the people of the state of California versus Aiden Michael Brooks, on the charge of murder in the first degree, how do you find? Patricia's voice was clear, but quiet. We find the defendant not guilty. Gasps erupted from the prosecution side. Rachel Brennan's face showed surprise. On the lesser-included offense of murder in the second degree, how do you find? We find the defendant guilty. Rosa Martinez let out a wail. Miguel buried his face in his hands. On the defense side, Linda Brooks sobbed with relief. It could have been worse. Aiden stood frozen, his face blank. Judge Hollingsworth banged his gavel. "Order! I will have order in this courtroom." The room quieted. "Renewed. The verdict is accepted. The jury is dismissed with the court's gratitude for their service. Sentencing will be held on June 15, 2018. The defendant will remain in custody until that time. We are adjourned." The gavel fell. Aiden was led away in handcuffs. He looked back once at his parents, his eyes finally showing emotion. Fear. The jurors filed out. Several were crying. Patricia Delgado would later tell reporters, "It was the hardest decision of my life. But we tried to balance justice with mercy. He's a child. He's not an adult." The verdict reflects that. Outside the courthouse, Rachel Brennan gave a brief statement. "While we had hoped for a first-degree conviction, we respect the jury's verdict. Aiden Brooks has been held accountable for taking a life, and that matters." Michael Torres also spoke. "Aiden is guilty of a terrible crime. But the jury recognized that he is a child who deserves a different standard than an adult. We will continue to fight for a fair sentence." Rosa and Miguel Martinez did not speak to the press. They left through a side door, supported by family members. The case was not over. Sentencing remained. Sentencing hearing, June 15, 2018. 2 months after the verdict, the courtroom reconvened for sentencing. Under California law, second-degree murder carries a sentence of 15 years to life. But because Aiden was a juvenile at the time of the crime, Judge Hollingsworth had some discretion. He could sentence Aiden to a juvenile facility until age 25, at which point he would be released. Or he could sentence him as an adult to prison with the possibility of parole. The hearing began with victim impact statements. Victim impact statement. #1. Rosa Martinez, Ethan's mother. Rosa Martinez approached the lectern slowly. She wore all black and held a framed photo of Ethan. "Your Honor," she began, her voice breaking, "my son was 12 years old. He loved soccer. He loved his family. He was supposed to graduate high school, go to college, maybe become a doctor like he always said he wanted to. He's never going to do those things. Because Aiden Brooks killed him. I don't care that Aiden was 12. I don't care that he was bullied. My son is dead. He was stabbed 37 times. He died scared and in pain. Every night, I see his face. I hear him calling for me, and I couldn't save him because I wasn't there. I trusted him to go to a friend's house, and he never came home. Your Honor, I'm asking you to give Aiden the maximum sentence. I know he's young. But Ethan was young too, and Ethan doesn't get a second chance. So why should Aiden?" Rosa returned to her seat, sobbing. Victim impact statement #2. Miguel Martinez, Ethan's father. Miguel spoke next, his voice hard and controlled. "Your Honor, I'm a firefighter. I've seen people die. I've seen tragedy. But nothing prepared me for losing my son like this. The defense kept saying Aiden was bullied. Maybe he was. But my son is not here to defend himself. My son can't tell his side of the story. All I know is that my boy went to a sleepover and never came home. And the person who killed him is asking for mercy. Where was the mercy for Ethan? Where was the mercy when he was being stabbed? When he was trying to fight back? I don't want to hear about Aiden's trauma or his mental health or his age. I want justice for my son. Please, Your Honor. Maximum sentence." Victim impact statement #3. Isabella Martinez, Ethan's sister. Ethan's 15-year-old sister spoke last. "Your Honor, Ethan was my little brother. He was annoying sometimes, but I loved him. We were supposed to grow old together. We were supposed to watch each other's kids grow up. Now, I'm an only child. My parents cry every day. Our house is empty without him. I heard people say Ethan was a bully. Maybe he teased Aiden sometimes. Kids tease each other. But that doesn't mean he deserved to die. I don't know what the right sentence is, but I know that my brother is gone forever, and Aiden took that from us." After the victim statements, Judge Hollingsworth asked if Aiden wanted to speak. Aiden stood, his voice barely audible. "I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. I know I can never fix what I did. But I'm sorry every day. I wish I could bring Ethan back. I wish I had done things differently. I'm sorry." He sat down. Judge Hollingsworth took a long moment before speaking. "Aiden Michael Brooks, you have been convicted by a jury of your peers of murder in the second degree. The evidence showed that you took the life of another child, a child who trusted you, who came to your home believing you were his friend. I have listened to the testimony. I have reviewed the psychological evaluations. I understand that you were bullied. I understand that you suffered from depression and PTSD. I understand that you were only 12 years old. But I also understand that Ethan Martinez is dead, that his family will never see him again, that he will never graduate, never fall in love, never have children of his own. You took that from him. You took that from his family. The law gives me discretion in sentencing juveniles. Some believe that children should never be sentenced as adults, that rehabilitation should always be the goal. But some crimes are so serious that accountability must be prioritized. Taking into account your age, your mental health, and the circumstances of this crime, I sentence you to 15 years to life in state prison. You will be eligible for parole after serving 15 years, at which point you will be 27 years old. If the parole board determines that you have been rehabilitated and no longer pose a danger to society, you may be released. If not, you will remain in prison. This sentence reflects both accountability and the possibility of redemption. You will spend your teenage years and early adulthood in prison. But he will have a chance that Ethan Martinez will never have to build a life after that. I hope you use that chance to become someone different, someone who values life, someone who understands the weight of what you've done. May God have mercy on your soul." This court is adjourned. The gavel fell. Aiden was led away in handcuffs. He looked back once at his parents, tears streaming down his face. He would be transferred to a juvenile facility initially, then to adult prison when he turned 18. He would be eligible for parole in 2032, at age 27. Whether he would ever be released would depend on the person he became behind bars. Where is Aiden Brooks now? Aiden Michael Brooks, inmate number J47-191, is currently incarcerated at the California Youth Authority facility in Stockton, California. He will be transferred to an adult state prison when he turns 18 in July 2023. He is now 17 years old. He has been a model inmate. He participates in therapy, attends school within the facility, and has had no disciplinary infraction. His therapist reports that he has made significant progress in understanding the impact of his actions and developing empathy. He writes letters to the Martinez family every year on the anniversary of Ethan's death. They have never responded, and he does not expect them to. His parents visit him once a month. Jason Brooks retired from teaching in 2019, unable to continue after the trial. Linda Brooks still works as a dental hygienist, but has become an advocate for anti-bullying programs and mental health awareness for children. Rosa and Miguel Martinez have also become advocates. They established the Ethan Martinez Foundation, which provides funding for school anti-violence programs. Rosa has testified before the California State Legislature in support of stricter bullying laws. Isabella Martinez graduated high school in 2020 and is now studying social work in college. She has said publicly that she hopes to work with at-risk youth so that what happened to my brother and Aiden never happens again. The case sparked national debate about juvenile justice, bullying, and trying children as adults. California considered legislation to prohibit prosecuting children under 14 as adults, but the bill failed to pass. Derek Chen, the classmate Aiden texted about wishing Ethan would disappear, has never spoken publicly about the case. He moved to a different school district after the trial. Sophia Martinez, no relation to Ethan, the classmate who testified about the bullying, has become an anti-bullying activist at her high school. Riverside Middle School implemented comprehensive anti-bullying policies after the case, including mandatory training for teachers and staff on recognizing and intervening in bullying situations. Aiden will be eligible for his first parole hearing in 2032. He will be 27 years old. The parole board will evaluate whether he has been rehabilitated, whether he understands the gravity of his crime, and whether he poses a risk to public safety. If he is paroled, he will have spent half his life in prison. If he is denied, he will remain incarcerated until his next hearing, scheduled 2 years later. The question of whether children can be redeemed remains unanswered. Aiden's case will be a test of the juvenile justice system's belief in rehabilitation. For the Martinez family, no amount of time, no amount of rehabilitation will bring Ethan back. He would have been 17 now. He would have been applying to colleges. He would have been playing soccer, hanging out with friends, planning his future. Instead, he's buried at Olivewood Cemetery in Riverside under a headstone that reads, Ethan James Martinez, beloved son and brother, forever 12. On his birthday every year, Rosa Martinez brings flowers to his grave and sits with him for hours, talking to him about what his life might have been. And every year, Aiden Brooks writes her a letter that begins, I know you will never forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I want you to know that I think about Ethan every day, and I am so sorry. Rosa has never opened the letters. She keeps them in a box in her closet, unopened and unread. Perhaps someday she will open them. Perhaps someday forgiveness will be possible. But not today. Not yet. Maybe never.